Welcome to Emotionally Balanced with Dido Balla, where we make emotional regulation easy and accessible for you and everyone. Join me and my guests for real conversations and practical tools to help you navigate life's ups and downs with confidence, calm, and clarity. Welcome to Emotionally Balanced with Dido Balla. I'm your host Dido, and today your guest is me. This is a solo episode, so let's get into what the goal of today is going to be. So I'm hoping to cover a few subjects. First, I want to dive a little deeper into what emotional regulation means. Then I want to talk about why it matters, why we should all care about what this means. Then I want to talk about the traditional ways in which we have typically seen emotional regulation appear. Then I want to talk about how we can connect emotional regulation to our identities. And then I want to spend some time talking about how to develop a method that I have used for years to become more emotionally balanced. So let's see how long this takes. This may be 2 episodes or one, I don't know yet. So let's talk about emotional regulation first. So, what is it? The principle behind this is that there are many versions of yourself, right? And a simple way I think about this is think about the alarm that you use for your phone right now to wake you up. So if you chose a song that's aggressive and that makes you angry in the morning, that is interesting because you who are annoyed in the morning when you hear that alarm is a part of you that is distant from the you who chose that song, that music, that sound for the alarm. You who wakes up at 5 a.m. and is upset is a different version of you compared to the one that chose to wake up at that time and set up the alarm. So it is still you, but there are different versions of you. Or think about it this way. Is there a thing that sometimes triggers you and other times does not trigger you? Or is there a message that, if delivered by a certain person, triggers you, but delivered by somebody else does not trigger you? Why is it that there's a version of you that gets upset if somebody interrupts you or cuts you off in traffic, but there's a version that does not get upset, right? So there are many versions of you. And the concept behind emotional regulation is there's something you can do about shifting between one version of yourself and the other version. The version that we want to learn how to identify first is the version that I call the dysregulated version of yourself. You are emotionally dysregulated when your emotions run high. You are triggered. Being triggered is the term that we all use today. And if you look into neuroscience a little deeper, it is the version of yourself that is dominated by what people call the monkey mind or the reptilian brain, which is mostly that amygdala part of your brain. And when you are triggered, you tend to make snap judgment, take actions that are a little rash, that can be a little more aggressive, a little stronger than the other version of you would prefer. And when you make those decisions, typically an hour or two later, 2 days later, a week later, you look at that version of yourself and you say, why did I make that decision? The thing is, that triggered version of yourself, that emotionally dysregulated version of yourself, was not thinking clearly. Think about your brain having two parts, and I'm simplifying here, right? Think about the part that makes the calm, mindful decisions and the one that is rash and reactive when something happens. When you are triggered, the bridge between those two parts is a little disconnected. And it's difficult for you to go from being triggered to access the calm version of yourself that would regulate your emotions, calm down before you make a decision. So the more you can learn how to identify when you are triggered, the more you can realize that you want to shift from being dysregulated to being emotionally regulated. And there are many common ways in which you can identify the dysregulation in yourself. And some examples that I just found on ChatGPT quickly, right? So social media triggers, whether it be people leaving a negative comment on your social media, or people appearing to be more successful than you, and you feeling as if there's something wrong with you because you aren't as successful. It's your doom scrolling bad news. Imagine that. You grab your phone in the morning, and the first 30 minutes of your day, you doom scroll through all the bad news that happened all around the globe while you were asleep. Of course, that's going to trigger you and put you in a place where you aren't the version of yourself that would be regulated and make the kinds of decisions that make you proud. It can also be a workplace, receiving negative feedback or criticism, dealing with difficult coworkers or bosses. That's very triggering. Feeling overwhelmed with deadlines, working from home, but having burnout because you don't feel like you have that work life balance. Traffic and daily inconveniences. Somebody cuts you off aggressively. Long lines at the grocery store, at the airport. I mean, the airport is the place that I go to the most to observe people who are dysregulated. And it is fascinating to watch how standing in line can trigger people and have them take actions that most likely they would not be proud of if they watch themselves later. Same thing with personal relationships and conflict, arguments with families, partners, feeling unheard or misunderstood in conversations. Think about the last time that you had an argument with somebody you cared about and you wanted to be heard, but they just wanted to give you a solution. The more they propose a solution, the more triggered you get, even though they're trying to help. It's because they aren't meeting your need at the moment and you're being dysregulated. Financial stress, unexpected bills, feeling behind on saving or paying off debt, political issues, heated debates on race, gender, or human rights, seeing injustice or discrimination firsthand, health, body image struggles, dealing with weight gain, aging, body changes, life's transitions, moving to a new city, starting a new job, not knowing what's next for you in life. All those things make you feel emotionally triggered and make it difficult for you to make the best decisions you can make. And so the goal is to one, have awareness around that and not judge yourself. There's nothing wrong with you if all the things that are listed trigger you or get you dysregulated. In fact, welcome to being a human being. You are a human being who feels. It is normal to have feelings and to feel dysregulated every now and then. The good news is that you can do something about shifting that emotional state. Any practice that you can have, any healthy tool, and healthy according to you, right, that you can have that can allow you to shift from being dysregulated to regulated is practicing emotion regulation and being emotionally balanced. I want to start by talking about ways in which we naturally do this. I mean, when I was a baby, when I was a kid, I don't know about you guys, I used to suck my thumb when I felt sad or upset or when I was crying. And I've seen babies use a pacifier, right? What is that? That's a way to take a kid or a baby from being dysregulated to being regulated. Sometimes holding a baby and rocking the baby calms them down. So I want you to think about examples that everybody has is familiar with. You don't have to think about these big words, emotional regulation. Everybody has seen or has attempted to soothe themselves or to soothe somebody else. If you have a little brother or a little sister or a kid, how do you soothe them? Do you give them water? Do you hold their hands? Do you tell them everything is going to be okay? Do you show them a different perspective? Do you put them in bed? Do you give them food? All those things are designed to regulate your emotions. So if you are in doubt and wonder why you might be a little more easily triggered one particular day than the others, there are a few things you can always do. Ask yourself, have I slept enough? Right? There's a reason why when the kid is going through it, often the parents say he hasn't slept or she hasn't slept, put them to bed, let them sleep and rest. Have you slept enough? Number two, have you eaten? Have you eaten? Because just like a little baby, a little kid, sometimes you are hangry and you just need some food. Number three is have you had some human connection and interactions? There's something about being alone and cut off from society and from other people that makes it difficult to stay regulated. That's why I assume, I mean, I think the baby is sleeping and then wakes up. when they wake up and they notice that there's nobody around them, they start crying because they want that attention, that social interaction. Same thing for adults. Something else to do is movement. If you haven't moved, and I'm not saying about exercising and doing something very difficult, although that's also helpful and healthy and ways to regulate your emotions. I'm just talking about moving your body some way. So if you haven't been sleeping well, you have not been interacting with people, you have not had food, and you haven't moved, it'll be very difficult for you to be in a state where it's easy for you to go from being triggered, dysregulated, to being non-triggered, regulated. So those are a couple of things that are just natural, right? So why does this matter? This matters because imagine the world we live in today. Think about how divided we are in real life and on social media about everything, from who should be the person who's leading our country, which party should be in charge, to who should make decisions about what we do in schools, who should make the decisions about who we hire, how we get to work. Should we work from home? Should we work remotely? I mean, all these things are triggering. Again, even simple examples such as when you're driving and there's traffic, there's so many of these decisions, these situations that are triggering. And yet, if we don't learn how to be emotionally regulated, the versions of ourselves dealing with those situations is often going to be a disappointing one. The most powerful example for me is during COVID. People did not see it coming, at least most of us did not. And when COVID happened, we realized that we have a lot less control over what happens around us than we thought. And so when I was working with teachers, what I told them is, look, you don't control how long COVID is going to last. You don't control how long the lockdown is going to last. You don't control how long teaching remotely or in a hybrid fashion is going to last. All you can control is the version of yourself that shows up to deal with those unknowns. And if you can affect the version of yourself that is here presently and give that version of yourself chances to be more emotionally regulated, then the version that shows up in front of the kids is going to be the best version that can show up, and you would be better prepared to deal with the unknown. So the best thing you can do for yourself is learn how to be emotionally regulated, because you don't control what happens to you. You really don't. Most of the things that happen around you, you don't control them, but you have all the control you can to affect who you are and how you feel and how you respond to those situations. So emotional regulation matters because you want to be a little more in control. And I think about the situations, the people, the thing that tend to trigger me, and how proud I am when I can see or feel those things coming. And I know I have the tools to regulate my emotions and therefore not give in to the temptation to snap or not allow somebody else to push my buttons. How powerful is that? That if something or somebody, intentionally or not, is pushing your buttons to try to get a reaction, and you can see it coming, feel it coming, and have the tools to regulate your emotions so that you can be more emotionally balanced to deal with the situation. So that's the way I want to introduce this topic. So as you can see, you don't even have to think about new tools. You already do things right now that are emotional regulation. That's step one. So if you can just identify the times, the situations that trigger you, and then make a list of some of those things that I mentioned earlier, or the things you already do naturally, like listening to music, for example, to calm you down, that'd be super interesting. Okay, so I covered what it is, why it matters. What has it traditionally looked like? I mean, I gave examples of what we do with kids, but in the field of emotional regulation, because I began my career in education, then get into mindfulness. Typically within that field, mindfulness was the word that people were using. And mindfulness just means practicing awareness of the present moment without judgment. So people think of meditation right away. But really, if you are sitting here in awareness of where you are and you focus on how your breath is going, for example, and you don't judge yourself or your experience, that is practicing mindfulness. Now, using your breath to regulate your emotions is really powerful. If you are listening or following, put your hands on your stomach and take a deep inhale, long exhale, and get your shoulders down. One more, deep inhale, long exhale, relax your shoulders. This simple tool is one that our ancestors have been familiar with for a long time. There's a reason why we've always told people to take a few deep breaths or take one deep breath. Sometimes before I start a tough workout, without even thinking about it, I just take one deep breath and then I go in. It's because my body knows, your body knows, our bodies know that that one deep breath does something to calm our nervous system. So to be a little more tactical about it, when you want to use breathing to regulate your emotions, it's important to not rely on just the automatic breathing that happens in your body without you thinking about it, right? So most of us don't think about breathing, you just breathe. But there's a shift you can make to breathe more intentionally. That's when you decide, for example, how long should the inhale be? How deep should it be? Should you breathe up from your chest or down from your belly? How long should the exhale be? Should you exhale or inhale through your mouth or through your nose? That's more intentional. So, mindful breathing, which leads to emotional regulation, is deep, intentional breathing. Fill your belly, fill your stomach when you inhale, because that's how you get as much oxygen as you can into your brain. And then long exhale, because that's how you calm your nervous system. So that's a very simple and traditional way to regulate your emotions. However, I'm sure you've heard about meditation consistently, and depending on who you are, it either turns you off or it excites you. So for people who get turned off by meditation, I will suggest to you that that's okay, because that is just one way of practicing emotion regulation. If it's not for you, that's fine. But traditionally, meditation has been one way that people are using, one practice that people use to regulate their emotions. But I want to talk about how you can connect emotion regulation to your identity. The number one reason why people may not be willing to look into emotion regulation, in my experience, is that they feel like those techniques, those practices don't make sense for them and who they are. I know I'm a tall, big black man. I'm 6'2", 222 pounds at this point. And the first time somebody told me to go do yoga as a way to regulate my emotions, I said, "Well, is there a different practice that I can try?" I mean, by this point, I have attempted yoga many times, and I enjoy it when I do it, but I had a resistance, and so if you have resistance to it, that's okay. Think about who you are and your actual identity. Within your identity, the things that make you you, your cultural identity, the things that make you feel like this is what my group does. I'm the kind of person who does this, whether it be um, doing community work. For someone like me, getting my hair done is a way to practice emotional regulation. There's something about uh, my head, somebody's doing my hair, and I'm sitting there calmly either connecting with the person or I'm just quiet. There's something about that for me that allows me to be very present, be non-judgmental, aware of the moment, and just regulate my feelings, my emotions. That's me. For some people, music can help you regulate your emotions. Everyone should have a playlist with some songs that when they feel dysregulated, they can trust that playing this song or this playlist will help them move from triggered to non-triggered. My good friend, Dr. Kate Truitt, I had an episode with her. On our episode, she talked about having a playlist that first matches your current emotional state. So if you are sad or angry, it's okay to validate that with some songs that are playing into that anger or that sadness, but to gradually shift the kinds of songs you're playing so they can travel with you mindfully away from the anger, away from the sadness, and bring you into a more emotionally settled, balanced place. So music works. Movement also works. So some people who practice martial arts, Tai Chi, for example, that's a way to remain emotionally balanced. You just gotta find what works for you. There's a resource I want to give a shout out to. Um, Anybody watching or listening at home, just Google the tree of contemplative practices. Just look that up, and you will find so many examples of ways to practice emotional regulation that may be a little surprising to you. So I'm going to read a few here. Journaling, contemplative art, work and volunteering, bearing witness, deep listening, council circles, storytelling, dialogue, labyrinth walking, yoga, dance, aikido, tai chi, establishing a sacred personal space, retreats, ceremonies, and rituals based on spiritual or cultural traditions to be emotionally regulated. So I hope that you can give this a shot and realize that your identity can make sense with emotional regulation. Your identity can be connected to emotional regulation in a way that makes you comfortable with who you are, without having to feel like you are selling out and practicing what those people told you to do. So, everybody look up the tree of contemplative practices, and I'm sure it's going to be helpful. Okay. So, I've talked about what emotional regulation is, why it matters, what it's looked like traditionally, how you can connect it to your identity, and I want to close by talking about um, this cycle that I use, this method that I use to build neuroplasticity, because neuroplasticity is essentially the concept that our brains are always rewiring themselves, right? The version of myself that began this podcast is not the one that's speaking right now. Something has already changed from the thoughts that I've had, the ideas I have shared. Something has changed, and I'm currently a newer version of myself. With neuroplasticity, you can rewire your brain to learn new things, to improve your skills, become better at something. And it takes work. The same way it takes work to become physically fit, it takes work to become emotionally fit. So, in order for you to build the neural pathways to become more emotionally regulated, it takes time and practice. And the steps that I recommend are the ones that I use. Is the method that I call awareness, regulation, and fitness. Awareness, regulation, fitness. Awareness means that you want to learn how to have awareness without judgment of your emotional experience, right? You need to be able to have awareness of the emotional experience without judging it, whether it be one that makes you happy or not. The goal here is to take 1 week. So for this week, I am going to practice awareness of my emotional uh, state without judgment. That means that you pay attention at the end of every single day. Can you write down the peak of the emotional experiences that you had, good or bad, and just describe them without judging? If on your drives to work, somebody cut you off and you get angry, write that down and just describe that without judgment. If your boss sending you an email, a certain type of email with a certain type of subject triggered you, write that down. Just have awareness. What are the things that trigger you? Were you aware of that? Or are you surprised that somebody cutting you off in traffic triggers you? You should know these things. Everybody has habitual triggers. So practice having awareness of your habitual triggers and write them down. So you should know on a typical week, I am going to have a couple of things are going to happen to me that will trigger me. If somebody cuts me off in traffic, I get triggered. If I say hi to somebody, they don't respond, I get triggered. If somebody is late for a meeting, I get triggered. If the kids aren't in bed on time, I get triggered. If the kids have snacks in the bedroom, they eat in the bedroom or in front of the TV, I get triggered. You should all know what those things are. So have awareness with zero judgment. Then you should also have awareness of the typical ways in which you self-soothe. Because like I said, everybody does this one way or the other. The problem is that sometimes we do it in a way that's not healthy. Sometimes we drink. to soothe. Sometimes we yell at people, we scream, we avoid, we overeat. There are so many things that we do, quote unquote, naturally in order to soothe, to regulate our emotions, but we don't have awareness of those. So if you could spend the week practicing awareness and non-judgment of the ways in which you get triggered, and practicing awareness and non-judgment of the ways in which you regulate, that would be an amazing step because you can't fix what you don't know. Step one. Step two is when you start to regulate, right? Regulation. Regulation just means that if you go back to the examples of the different ways in which I told you can regulate your emotions, such as practicing martial arts, listening to music, sitting still, volunteering, uh, movement, start trying all those things during your regular week with those things that trigger you, especially things that aren't super high stake, right? Practice. Is it that when you get triggered, is it that something like breathing can help? Try. If it doesn't help, that's fine. Try something else. Is it that sitting still before going to a contentious meeting helps you feel better emotionally? If yes, good. If not, that's fine. Try something else. Can you use music? Try all those things. It's an experiment. You want to invest like it's a good portion of your time trying to figure out who you are, how you work. Like if you don't understand yourself, who else do you want to understand? Like the most important person in your life is you. So before you try to understand somebody else, you got to be an expert in you. So try all those things, invest in this. It's like working out. I know that I played soccer growing up. As an adult, I used to go play soccer with some friends for maybe a year or two, but then it was too far. So I was like, that's not going to work for me. I was lifting weights, then it just got boring. Um, and for me, it took me trying so many different things. I tried running. Right, I just ran a half marathon. I think what 6 months ago. It's good to try all those things, but I know that what works for me is functional fitness. That's why I love CrossFit. But even within CrossFit, I have removed certain movements that I will not do. I will not do handstand push-ups. I'm not interested in doing that. Right? I had to try different things though before I found what works for me. Same thing with emotional regulation. You need to try as many things as possible before you can find what works. So that's the section I call regulation. And this is the part where you have to be honest with yourself. If in the awareness section you realize that one of the ways in which you regulate your emotions naturally is unhealthy or maybe even harmful, again, number one, don't judge yourself. But then please start doing some work towards that. Try other things. And after that regulation is when you get to fitness. And being emotionally fit doesn't mean that you're perfect. Just like if I stop working out right now, all it takes is like 4 weeks, and I'm like, whoa, what happened to me? You will always practice, but I'm physically fit though. I'm fit because I have done a lot of awareness, a lot of regulation, and I found what works for me and I practice it consistently. So I'm fit. If something happens and I need to lift something heavy, I can do that. If something happens and I need to run somewhere, I can do that. I got a bike somewhere, I can do that. Um, Next on my list is swimming because I can't do that. So I'm physically fit because I have the tools that work for me and I can use them on demand to show my fitness, to use my fitness. The same thing is true for emotions. You need to get to a place where you have awareness of the things that trigger you, awareness of how you typically tend to respond. Regulate by trying different methods to regulate your emotions. Like try different things. Try. Like as long as it takes, try. You will find what works for you and for you only. Don't worry about your neighbor, your friend, your sister, your cousin, what works for you. And then once you identify two or three things, two or three go-to methods to regulate your emotions, and you use them comfortably when triggers show up. You already know when this happens, I grab this. When I see bad news on my cell phone, I can take a deep breath. When I feel overwhelmed, I can take a walk. When I feel judged, I have a safe person I can call and talk to. When I feel like I'm freezing, I feel my brain goes into fight, flight, freeze, and I can't move. What I need to do is make myself go play sports, whatever that is. Practice using that and that's how you become emotionally fit. So awareness, regulation, fitness is a cycle. You're never done, right? It's not linear where once you get to fitness, you're fit for life. You don't have to practice anymore. It's always a cycle. Okay, so I am going to stop here, and I I hope that this was helpful. I am going to continue the episodes with guests after this one. It's just that I wanted to have one episode in the middle where I dug a little deeper into the things that I want to teach myself when it comes to emotional regulation. And I'm going to have some guests coming up soon. And after that, I'm going to have a couple more solo episodes here and there. So I hope this one brought value to you. All right. Thank you for listening. And don't forget to follow on Instagram at Balance with Balla. That's the Instagram page. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please um, like or write a review and share with your friends, share with your families. If you know anybody who would benefit from some tools to practice emotional regulation, to be a little more emotionally balanced, please share this with them. I'm grateful you gave me your time, and I will see you next time. Please stay emotionally balanced.